A sunny afternoon in Maplewood, Ohio. Birds chirping, sprinklers hissing. The kind of neighborhood where kids pedal bikes until dusk and lemonade stands pop up on every corner. But beneath that postcard-perfect surface, something unthinkable happened. On June 14th, 2018, 4-year-old Rachel Gray, a little girl with pigtails, a dinosaur obsession, and a smile that could light up a room, was found motionless in her own backyard. Her tiny body lay crumpled near a swing set, still swaying gently, as if the universe itself refused to believe what had just occurred. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it didn't matter. Rachel was gone, and what detectives discovered next would fracture this community's sense of safety forever. The autopsy report ruled her death a homicide caused by catastrophic head trauma. But here's where the story takes a turn no one saw coming. The only person with Rachel in those final moments wasn't a stranger, a relative, or even another adult. It was a 2-year-old child. Let that sink in. A toddler, still stumbling over words, barely able to climb stairs, now at the center of a death investigation. How could someone who shouldn't even understand the concept of violence be linked to such a horrific act? Was this a freak accident, or something far darker? And why? 6 years later, do forensic experts still lose sleep over this case? Strap in, because what seems impossible might just be the truth. To understand the gravity of this tragedy, you need to know who Rachel Gray was, not just how she died, but how she lived. Neighbors called her the Sunbeam because she'd skip down sidewalks handing out dandelions to anyone who'd take them. Her bedroom was a kaleidoscope of finger paintings and stuffed animals, her favorite being a threadbare teddy bear named Mr. Noodles. Rachel's world revolved around simple joys, chasing fireflies at dusk, giggling at cartoon dinosaurs, and sneaking chocolate chip cookies from the jar when her mom wasn't looking. The Gray family lived on Willow Lane, a street where kids roamed freely between backyards. Parents traded babysitting favors, and summer nights meant block parties with popsicles and sparklers. Crime here was unheard of, the kind of place where car doors stayed unlocked and neighbors borrowed sugar at midnight without a second thought. But June 14th, 2018, rewrote the rules. Around 3:15 p.m., Rachel's mother, Linda, was supervising her daughter in the backyard. The playset, a bright red slide and swing set, was Rachel's kingdom. That day, she'd been pretending to be a T-Rex explorer, digging for fossils in the flower bed. When Linda's phone rang, she assumed it was safe to step inside. It was her sister calling to confirm weekend plans. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. What Linda didn't hear was the squeak of the swing slowing to a stop, or the way the backyard fell eerily silent, no more giggles, no crunch of gravel under tiny sneakers. When she returned, Rachel lay on her side near the base of the slide, her yellow sundress stained with grass and dirt. At first, Linda thought she'd napped until she touched her daughter's cold cheek. Paramedics arrived at 3:28 p.m. The 911 call, later obtained by reporters, captured Linda's screams in the background. "She's not breathing. Oh God, she's not breathing." Rachel was rushed to Mercy General Hospital, where doctors worked for 47 minutes to revive her. But the damage was too severe. The official cause of death? A subdural hematoma, a catastrophic brain bleed caused by repeated blows to the head. Not from a fall, not from an accident, from something or someone far more sinister. In the hours after Rachel's death, detectives treated Willow Lane like a crime scene, but their instincts told them this was a tragic accident. After all, playground falls happen every day. The swing set stood just 4 feet tall, the slide barely 6. The Gray's backyard was soft with spring grass, dotted with rubber mulch beneath the playset. It didn't add up. Then, the medical examiner's report landed like a grenade. Dr. Elena Voss, a pediatric forensic pathologist with 20 years of experience, ruled out a single fall. Rachel's skull fractures were bilateral, damage on both sides of her head. The bruising along her neck and shoulders suggested repeated impacts, like she'd been struck multiple times with a heavy, blunt object. Worse still, there were defensive wounds on her tiny hands, a sign she'd tried to shield herself from whatever, or whoever, was hurting her. Detectives combed the yard for weapons. Was it a garden tool? A rock? A toy? Nothing matched the injury patterns. No adult fingerprints were found on the playset. No strangers reported lurking nearby. The The Gray's neighbors were interviewed one by one, but no one saw or heard anything unusual until Detective Marcos Rivera reviewed a security camera from the house across the street. The timestamp read 3:07 p.m. The footage, grainy and washed out by sunlight, showed Rachel crouching by her sandbox, patting down a lopsided sandcastle. For a moment, the yard seemed empty until a blur darted into the frame. A toddler in denim overalls, barely taller than the lawn gnomes, wobbled toward Rachel. The child, a 2-year-old from the neighboring Smith family, picked up a plastic shovel and began digging beside her. Here's where the video gets strange. At 3:11 p.m., Rachel stands up, clutching her stomach. She sways, then collapses out of view behind the swing set. The toddler pauses, tilts their head, and toddles after her. For the next 3 minutes, both children are hidden from the camera. When the toddler reappears at 3:14 p.m., they're alone, dragging the shovel behind them, their face smudged with dirt. Detectives froze the frame. No adults, no older kids, just 2 preschoolers, one of whom would never make it home. The Smiths' toddler was too young to be interviewed, too young to even say their own name clearly. But the shovel in the video? Lab tests found traces of Rachel's blood and hair on its handle. Suddenly, the unthinkable became unavoidable. Could a 2-year-old's tantrum or curiosity have turned deadly? In the days following Rachel's death, detectives turned their attention to the only other person present in her final moments, the 2-year-old child from the house next door. To protect their privacy, we'll refer to this toddler as Sam. Sam's family had lived beside the Grays for years. The 2 children played together often, building sandcastles, blowing bubbles, and giggling over cartoons. They were playmates, not strangers. But on that terrible afternoon, something went horribly wrong. And now, investigators had to confront a question that defied common sense. Could a child who still needed help putting on their shoes have caused Rachel's fatal injuries? Let's be clear, Sam was not a suspect in the traditional sense. At 2 years old, they couldn't speak in full sentences, let alone understand the legal system. But the evidence was undeniable. Security footage showed Sam entering the Gray family's backyard alone at 3:07 p.m. For 3 critical minutes, the 2 toddlers were hidden from view behind the swing set. When Sam reappeared, Rachel was unconscious. Detectives needed answers. So they turned to the only people who could make sense of this paradox: child development experts and forensic psychologists. Dr. Miriam Carter, a pediatrician specializing in child trauma, was one of the first to review the case. She explained that toddlers Sam's age are in a phase of rapid physical growth, but their brains are still years away from understanding consequences. A 2-year-old's impulse control is virtually non-existent. Dr. Carter said, they act on frustration, curiosity, or even boredom, but never malice. Their actions are reflexes, not intentions, yet reflexes can still be dangerous. Dr. Carter cited a 2014 study where toddlers were observed interacting with dolls. In moments of frustration, some children struck the dolls with force comparable to a small adult punch. If a toddler picks up a heavy toy or rock, she said, that force multiplies. And if they hit another child in a vulnerable area, like the head, the results can be catastrophic. This wasn't just theory. In 2019, a 3-year-old in Florida accidentally killed a baby cousin by pushing them off a bed. In 2021, a 2-year-old in Texas caused severe brain damage to another child by throwing a metal toy truck. These cases are rare. Experts stress, but they're not impossible. Forensic analysts reconstructed Rachel's injuries to determine what might have happened. The autopsy showed she'd been struck at least 4 times with a blunt object. Bruises on her arms and shoulders suggested she'd tried to shield herself. Investigators combed the yard again and found a small garden shovel near the swing set. Its plastic handle tested positive for Rachel's DNA. The shovel weighed just 1.5 pounds, light enough for a toddler to swing, but heavy enough to crack a skull if thrown or slammed with enough force. But could Sam have done this intentionally? Dr. Lauren Gwynn, a child psychologist consulted by police, explained that toddlers lack the cognitive ability to plan violence. At 2 years old, children don't have a concept of death or permanent harm. She said, if Sam hit Rachel, it wasn't out of anger or hatred. It might have been a reaction to a snatched toy, a sudden noise, or even confusion. Imagine a toddler slamming a toy robot to see what happens, only this time, the toy was another child. This raised another grim question. Could Rachel's injuries have been accidental? If Sam stumbled while holding the shovel, could it have struck Rachel's head by chance? Dr. Carter doubted it. The pattern of injuries, repeated blows to multiple areas, suggests force applied more than once. A single accident might explain one wound, but not four. The legal system faced a nightmare. Even if Sam had caused Rachel's death, charging a 2-year-old was impossible. U.S. law universally recognizes that children under 5 cannot form criminal intent. Prosecutors debated whether Sam's parents could be held responsible for negligence, but there was no proof they'd acted recklessly. Sam had wandered into Rachel's yard through an unlocked gate, a common occurrence in their neighborhood. The Gray family was shattered. Rachel's father, Mark, told reporters, "We don't blame Sam. How can you blame a baby? But someone needs to answer for this. If it wasn't Sam, then who? And if it was, how do we live with that?" Asterisk the Smith family. Sam's parents retreated from public view. They released a brief statement. "Our hearts are broken for Rachel. We pray for her family every day. Please respect our privacy during this unimaginable time." Child welfare advocates seized on the case to push for better supervision guidelines. "This isn't about blaming parents," said Karen Lewis, director of Safe Start, a nonprofit focused on toddler safety. "It's about recognizing that even a moment of distraction can have lifelong consequences. Toddlers are stronger and more unpredictable than we think. They shouldn't play unsupervised ever." But critics argued this was unrealistic. "Parents can't watch their kids every second," said one child psychologist. "We've created a world where playgrounds are padded, toys are soft, and we still can't prevent tragedy. Sometimes, bad things happen, and there's no one to blame." In the end, the district attorney declined to press charges. The case was closed, labeled death by misadventure, a legal term for accidents that occur during risky behavior. But for Rachel's family, that explanation felt hollow. How could playing in her own backyard be risky? The Grays moved away from Willow Lane a year later. The Smiths stayed but became reclusive. Neighbors reported seeing Sam playing alone in their yard, always under the watchful eye of both parents. The once bustling block fell quiet, its laughter replaced by locked gates and drawn blinds. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened behind that swing set. Was it a tragic accident? A moment of unchecked toddler curiosity? Or something darker? A flicker of primal aggression that even experts can't explain? What we do know is this: Rachel's death forced parents, lawmakers, and scientists to confront uncomfortable truths. We teach our children to share, to be gentle, to say sorry when they hurt someone. But what if the person who hurts them hasn't learned those lessons yet? What if they're still learning to talk? In the weeks after Rachel Gray's death, prosecutors faced a crisis no legal textbook could prepare them for. On one side, a grieving family demanding justice. On the other, a toddler, barely older than a baby, who couldn't even comprehend the word guilt. How do you navigate a tragedy where the law itself seems to crumble? This is the story of a case that forced everyone, parents, lawyers, and lawmakers, to question the very foundations of right and wrong. Let's start with the facts. In the United States, children under the age of 5 cannot be charged with a crime. The legal system recognizes that toddlers lack the mental capacity to form criminal intent. They don't understand death, consequences, or the difference between hitting a toy and hitting a person. For prosecutors, this wasn't just a loophole, it was an insurmountable wall. Charging the 2-year-old, whom we've called Sam, was impossible. No court in the country would allow it, but Rachel's family refused to accept that. To them, labeling her death an accident felt like an insult. If a child dies, someone has to be responsible. Rachel's father, Mark Gray, told reporters, "If it wasn't Sam, then who? If it was, what does that even mean?" The family pushed for answers, but the law had none to give. Prosecutors scrambled for alternatives. Could Sam's parents be charged with negligence? Had they failed to supervise their child? Investigators dug into every detail. They learned Sam had wandered into Rachel's yard through an unlocked gate, a common practice in their neighborhood, where parents often let kids play between backyards. Sam's mother, Emily, had been inside making lunch. She'd checked on Sam through the kitchen window every few minutes. But on that day, Those few minutes were enough for tragedy to strike. Under Ohio law, criminal negligence requires proof of reckless disregard for safety. Did forgetting to lock a gate rise to that level? Not according to the district attorney. This was a horrible accident, not a crime. He said at a press conference, "We can't prosecute parents for being human," but Rachel's family disagreed. Their lawyer argued that the Smiths should have known their toddler was prone to wandering. This wasn't the first time Sam had gotten out. They claimed neighbors corroborated that Sam had slipped into other yards before. Still, without proof of prior incidents causing harm, the case collapsed. Negligence charges were dismissed. The legal deadlock sparked a national debate. Parenting forums exploded with arguments. If a dog bites someone, the owner is liable. One comment read, "Why not a child?" Others fired back, "Toddlers aren't pets. You can't punish parents for every mistake." Child psychologists weighed in. 2. Dr. Helen Reyes, a family therapist, explained, "Parenting is a series of calculated risks. You turn your back to make dinner, to answer the phone, things we all do. Holding parents criminally responsible for a toddler's actions sets a dangerous precedent. Where do we draw the line?" But for Rachel's mother, Linda, the line was clear. "If your child kills mine," she said in an emotional interview, "you don't get to just say, oops, and move on. Someone needs to be accountable." The district attorney's office spent months agonizing over the case. They consulted ethicists, pastors, and even a panel of parents who'd lost children. In the end, the decision came down to cold, hard law, without evidence of intent or criminal negligence. There was nothing to prosecute. On November 12, 2018, the case was officially closed. The cause of death? Misadventure, a term typically used for accidents during risky activities, like hiking or skiing. To the Grays, it felt like a slap in the face. Misadventure? Linda said, "Rachel was playing in her own backyard. Since when is that a risk?" The term misadventure did little to comfort the public. Either, headlines asked, "Is nowhere safe for kids?" And "Could your toddler be a killer?" Parents began second-guessing every play date, every moment of unsupervised play. The Smith family, meanwhile, became prisoners in their own home. Sam's father, David, quit his job to stay home full-time. "We live in constant fear," he told a friend. Fear of judgment, fear of another accident, fear of our own child. The Grays' search for closure took them down a darker path. They filed a civil lawsuit against the Smiths, seeking damages for wrongful death, but without criminal charges. The case faltered. A settlement was reached quietly, with the Smiths agreeing to pay for Rachel's medical and funeral expenses. No admission of guilt, no apology. For Linda, the settlement was salt in the wound. "Money won't bring her back," she said. "I just wanted someone to say, this was our fault. We're sorry." But that never happened. The Smiths, bound by the settlement's confidentiality clause, never spoke publicly again. They sold their house 2 years later and left Maplewood. Neighbors, say Sam, now a school-aged child, has no memory of the incident or of Rachel. Asterisk, Rachel's case left scars on the legal system. 2. Ohio lawmakers proposed Rachel's Law, a bill requiring stricter supervision standards for toddlers in public spaces. It failed, criticized as government overreach. "You can't legislate parenting," one senator argued, but the conversation had shifted. Daycares began enforcing zero unsupervised play policies. Parenting blogs warned of toddler aggression, sharing stories of bites and shoves gone wrong. Sales of backyard security cameras tripled in the year after Rachel's death. Psychologists noticed a ripple effect. 2. Parents are terrified of their own kids now, said Dr. Reyes. They see normal toddler tantrums as red flags. We're pathologizing childhood. In the end, Rachel's death became a Rorschach test for society's deepest fears. For some, it's a warning about the dangers of complacency. For others, a reminder that life is fragile and fairness is an illusion. The Grays moved to a rural town hundreds of miles away. They planted a garden in Rachel's memory, sunflowers. Her favorite. Linda keeps a photo of her daughter in every room. "I still hear her laugh sometimes," she says. "But then I remember, and it all goes quiet." As for Sam, they'll never know the weight of what happened that day. To them, Rachel is just a name in a story they'll never hear. A story with no heroes, no villains, And no answers, only questions that echo forever in the dark. Years have passed since Rachel Gray's death, but the questions surrounding it remain as haunting as ever. No arrests, no confessions, no closure. To this day, experts, psychologists, and even ordinary parents clash over what truly happened in that backyard. Was this a freak accident? A grim twist of fate? Or does Rachel's death force us to confront a truth we'd rather ignore? That violence isn't learned, but innate? Let's unravel the theories, the doubts, and the chilling possibilities that keep this case alive. Theory 1. A coincidence gone wrong. The simplest explanation is often the hardest to accept. Could the toddler's presence in the yard have been pure chance? Imagine this. Sam, the 2-year-old, wanders into Rachel's yard, curious and unsupervised. He finds a shovel, swings it playfully, and accidentally strikes Rachel. Panicked, he leaves. Rachel, already injured from an earlier fall, collapses. Dr. Aaron Klein, a forensic consultant, argues this is plausible. Children's bones are fragile. A prior injury, maybe from tripping or rough play, could have weakened her skull. The final blow might have been minor, but fatal. But Rachel's autopsy tells a darker story. The medical examiner noted multiple skull fractures, each with distinct force patterns. This wasn't one unlucky hit, said Dr. Elena Voss, the original pathologist. These were repeated strikes. So where does that leave us? Either the toddler's presence was a tragic coincidence, or something far more unsettling. Theory 2. The unthinkable act. Here's the theory that keeps detectives awake. Sam, in a moment of frustration or curiosity, attacked Rachel, not out of malice, but impulse, like kicking a tower of blocks. Child behaviorists confirm toddlers lack empathy. They don't grasp that hitting hurts, said Dr. Lauren Gwynn. If Sam took a toy from Rachel, and she resisted, he might have lashed out. To him, it's no different than smacking a doll. In 2016, a similar case made headlines in Sweden. A 3-year-old shoved a playmate off a balcony, believing they'd fly like Superman. The victim survived, but the aggressor had no remorse, just confusion. Could Sam have seen Rachel as a doll to experiment on? The shovel's DNA evidence suggests intent, but intent requires understanding. And Sam? He was still learning to say please. Theory 3. A hidden culprit. Not everyone buys the toddler theory. Conspiracy forums buzz with alternatives. Could an older child have been involved? A stray animal? Or even a parent? Detectives re-examined every lead. The security footage showed no one else in the yard. Neighbors alibied each other. Rachel's parents passed polygraphs. But here's a chilling twist. 2 weeks before Rachel's death, a man in a gray hoodie was spotted lingering near the playground. He vanished before police arrived. Could he have returned? Investigators found no evidence linking him to the case. Still, Rachel's father, Mark, clings to this thread. I want to believe it was a stranger, he said, because the alternative means nowhere is safe. The science of small aggressors' child development research adds fuel to the fire. Studies show toddlers do exhibit aggression, biting, hitting, hair pulling, peaking at age 2. Most outgrow it by 4. But in rare cases, the violence escalates. Dr. Helen Reyes cites a 2020 study. Out of 10,000 toddlers, 3% displayed extreme physical aggression, scratching faces, throwing heavy objects. None understood the harm they caused. It's not evil, Dr. Reyes stresses. It's curiosity meeting underdeveloped brains. They're testing boundaries, not plotting harm. But what if those tests turn deadly? Rachel's case sits in this horrifying gray area, a toddler's normal behavior colliding with lethal consequences. The ripple effect, Rachel's death, didn't just fracture 2 families. It shattered a community's trust. Maplewood's once bustling parks emptied. Parents installed padlocks on backyard gates. Playdates became supervised military operations. I used to let my kids run wild, said a neighbor, voice trembling. Now I watch them like a hawk. Even their tantrums scare me. Childcare centers felt the aftershocks. Parents ask us, could my child hurt someone? Said a preschool director. We've had toddlers suspended for biting. It's madness. Even Sam's family became casualties. Sam's aunt revealed. They changed their last name, moved states. Sam doesn't know why they left or who they're running from. The legacy of a question mark, Rachel's story haunts because it refuses to fit into boxes. It's not a crime thriller with a clear villain. It's not a parenting manual with easy lessons. It's a riddle with no answer, a Rorschach test for our deepest fears. Some see it as a call for vigilance. Never leave kids alone. Warn safety ads. Others see futility. You can't bubble wrap the world. Argue critics. For Rachel's mother, Linda, the questions are a life sentence. I'll go to my grave wondering, she said. Was it an accident? A monster? Or just bad luck? The truth? We may never know. The evidence is cold. The witnesses are toddlers who can't or won't remember. And the only person who knows is Rachel, and she's gone. The final paradox. So where does this leave us? With a haunting lesson. Danger isn't always a stranger in a dark alley. Sometimes, it's a giggling child in a sunlit yard. Psychologists call this normalized risk. The idea that we fear dramatic threats, kidnappers, storms, but ignore mundane ones, a toddler with a rock. Rachel's death forces us to confront that blind spot. As one detective put it, we're wired to protect kids from adults. But how do you protect them from each other? The answer? We can't. Not fully. All we can do is watch, listen, and hope. Because sometimes, tragedy isn't a lesson, it's a void. A silence where answers should be. Rachel's garden still grows in Maplewood. Sunflowers, bright and tall, swaying in the breeze. A memorial to a life cut short. A reminder that even in the light, shadows linger, and some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. Imagine this. You're pushing your child on a swing at the park. They're laughing, their tiny hands gripping the chains, sunlight filtering through their hair. You glance away for a second to check your phone, to tie a shoelace, to wave at a friend, and in that heartbeat, the unthinkable happens. This is the nightmare Rachel Gray's story burned into every parent's mind. A nightmare where danger isn't a stranger, a storm, or a shadow, but a playmate. A child, a toddler still learning to say, I'm sorry. Rachel's name is now shorthand for a fear we didn't know we had. Her face smiles back from playground safety posters in pediatricians' offices. Her story dominates online parenting forums, where debates rage. Would a nanny cam have saved her? Should toddlers never play unsupervised? Are we raising monsters? But beneath the outrage and the hashtags lies a question no policy can fix. No law can answer. How do you protect children from children? In the years since her death, Rachel's case has rewritten the rules of modern parenting. Backyard swing sets are now outfitted with security cameras. Daycares enforce zero-touch policies, punishing toddlers for even accidental bumps. Parents eye their own children differently, wondering, could they? Would they? A 2022 survey found that 1 in 3 parents admitted to fearing their child might unintentionally harm another. But this hypervigilance comes at a cost. Child psychologists warn of a generation growing up under surveillance, stripped of the freedom to explore, to quarrel, to be kids. We're raising them in cages of our own fear, says Dr. Miriam Carter. We've traded skinned knees for psychological scars. Yet who can blame parents? Rachel's case is a grenade lobbed into the heart of trust. If a backyard swing set isn't safe, what is? If a toddler's tantrum can turn lethal, where do we draw the line between caution and paranoia? The legal system offers no solace. Rachel's death was ruled a misadventure, a term that feels as hollow as the Gray family's empty nursery. No one was punished. No one was blamed. The toddler linked to her death, now a 7-year-old with no memory of that day, will never face consequences. Linda Gray, Rachel's mother, has become an accidental activist. She lobbies for stricter playground safety laws, but her mission is tinged with despair. I don't care about lawsuits or legislation anymore. She confesses, I just want to stop another parent from feeling this nothingness, this void where your child used to be. Meanwhile, the Smith family, Sam's parents, live in self-imposed exile. They changed their names, severed ties with friends, and homeschool their child. We're not hiding from the law, Sam's father told a therapist. Leaked in court documents, we're hiding from the world's judgment and our own guilt. But here's the cruelest twist of all. Rachel's death didn't make the world safer. It just made it quieter. The parks of Maplewood, once buzzing with laughter, now sit empty. Parents hover like hawks, snapping at kids to be careful or don't touch. Birthday parties have become risk assessment exercises, with parents trading nervous glances as toddlers clutch plastic shovels. And what of the children? Sam, now 7, will one day Google their own name. They'll discover the whispers, The forums, the documentaries. How do you explain to a child that they might have, accidentally, ended a life? Dr. Lauren Gwynn, the child psychologist, warns of the fallout. Sam's story is a time bomb. When they learn the truth, the shame could be catastrophic. We've sacrificed 2 families to a question we're too afraid to answer. So where does this leave us? With sunflowers, after Rachel's death, her family planted a garden in her memory. Sunflowers, her favorite because they always turn toward the light. Linda tends to them daily, her hands buried in soil, her mind replaying that final afternoon. I try to focus on the good memories, she says, but the what-ifs are weeds. They never stop growing. Maybe that's the legacy of this case, not answers, but a warning etched in grief, a reminder that for all our rules, our cameras, our fear, we're still just one split second from disaster. That innocence isn't armor. That safety is an illusion. And so we cling to rituals. We double-check gates. We watch the nanny cams. We hold our breath as our children play, hoping today isn't the day curiosity collides with catastrophe. But Rachel's story whispers the truth we dread. There's no such thing as safe enough. The sunflowers keep growing. The swings keep swaying. And somewhere, a parent glances at their child, their sweet, unknowable child, and wonders, so what do you think? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Or was it a perfect storm of innocence, chance, and horror? Drop your thoughts below. Do we need stricter laws? Or is this a risk we must accept to let kids be kids? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because the scariest mysteries aren't the ones in the dark. They're the ones we carry into the light. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and hold your loved ones a little tighter tonight.